Some smiles are more like a lid than an ending. You are in a bright room, hearing laughter rise around a comment that lands a little too close to something tender. Your face answers before the rest of you can. You smile, nod, maybe add a small laugh, because that is the safest way to keep the room moving. And it works. The conversation keeps going. Someone reaches for a drink. A chair shifts against the floor. Another topic appears, and everyone steps into it easily. From the outside, nothing dramatic happened. No one stopped. No one asked if you were okay. The moment passed with the ordinary speed of social life. But later, it returns with strange precision. Maybe you are brushing your teeth, watching foam collect at the edge of the sink, and the sentence comes back exactly as it sounded. Or you are lying still, phone screen dark in your hand, and suddenly you hear the tone again. Not only the words, but the pause before them, the quick laugh after, the tiny instant when your face kept smiling while something inside you fell behind. That is the private confusion. Why does a moment feel unresolved when everyone else has already left it? Part of the answer is that public endings and inner endings do not always arrive together. The room may have moved on, but your body was still trying to understand what happened. Was it only a joke? Was there a message inside it? Did your smile make the hurt invisible, or did it make you look as if you agreed? Did anyone notice the split second when you did not know what to feel? This is how one small moment can start sounding larger in memory than it seemed in real time. Not because you are dramatic, not because you secretly want a problem, but because, in the moment, you chose smoothness. You protected the room before you had time to protect yourself. The smile did something useful. It helped you stay composed. It kept the scene from breaking open in public, but it also left a response unfinished underneath it. So when the sentence returns later, it is not always proof that something was ruined. It may be a clue that some part of you never got to finish responding. The private retelling is not the damage itself. It is the mind pointing back to the place where you swallowed a question, softened a hurt, or rushed past your own reaction. And once the door closes, where does all that unfinished response go? That is why the next section stays with those ordinary seconds after the slip, when the room is still mostly quiet and your interpretation starts getting louder. The strange part is how responsible it can feel to keep repairing a moment nobody else is touching. You get home, close the door, and suddenly the scene has more lighting than it had when it happened. The exact sentence comes back. Your own laugh sounds a little too high. The other person's face seems sharper now, especially the half-second before they answered. You set your keys down, but your mind keeps standing there, still in the room. So you start working. You rewrite what you should have said. Not wildly, just one cleaner sentence. A softer version. A braver version. A version where your face does not tighten, where you do not smile so quickly, where you let the comment land, instead of covering it with politeness. Then the apology draft opens in your head, maybe even on your phone. Sorry if that came out weird. I just wanted to clarify. I hope I didn't make that uncomfortable. You may never send it, but writing it gives the feeling somewhere to go. Then comes the checking. The chat thread. The reaction that did not appear. The message read, but not answered. The tiny absence that starts to feel like information. You are not only remembering now, you are investigating. And that is why the pattern can be so hard to question. It does not feel like spiraling from the inside. It feels like being careful. It feels like taking accountability. It feels like preventing damage before it spreads. But often, what you are fixing is not the relationship. You are trying to give your body the response it had to swallow in public. In the moment, you smiled, because smiling kept the room smooth. You nodded, because pausing would have made the air heavier. You let the scene pass, because that was the fastest way to stay safe and kind, and acceptable and unexposed. Only later does the delayed response arrive. The irritation, the embarrassment, the wish to explain yourself, the urge to be understood correctly, the need to prove that the version of you in that room was not the whole story. So the private repair work begins, because action gives the nervous system a handle to hold. If you can edit the wording, maybe the feeling will settle. If you can send the perfect message, maybe the uncertainty will close. If you can find one reassuring sign, maybe the scene will finally end. This is not weakness. It is not proof that you are too sensitive. It is delayed self-protection, arriving after the polite version of you already got through the moment. And once the mind starts searching for safety afterward, one small cue can begin to carry far more meaning than it deserves. That is why the next section can name the pattern clearly, instead of leaving it inside the flinch. Sometimes the smallest clue becomes the loudest part of the memory. Maybe it was the half-second before someone answered, the glance they gave the table, the flat "yeah" after you tried to sound easy. In the room, that cue had competition. Chairs moved. Someone reached for a drink. Another person changed the subject. Life kept going. But later, when you are alone, the mind pulls that one detail out of the crowd and places a circle around it. This is attention bias in ordinary clothes. Attention starts leaning too hard on one cue, then treats that cue like a key to the whole scene. The pause no longer feels like a pause. It feels like hesitation. The glance no longer feels random. It feels like disappointment. The short reply no longer sounds like someone being tired. It sounds like proof that something changed. And because the moment involved you, the cue feels even more convincing. Embarrassment has a way of narrowing the room. It makes your own face, your own voice, your own timing feel painfully visible. You are not just remembering what happened. You are remembering yourself being seen while it happened. So the mind starts checking for damage. Did they notice that I smiled too fast? Did my laugh sound forced? Did my silence make the comment seem worse? Did I give away that I was hurt? If you already carry fear of being judged, unclear cues can become even sharper. The brain does not like not knowing where it stands with people, so it starts scanning for threat, not because you are weak, but because belonging has always mattered to human beings. A strange pause can feel like distance. A delayed response can feel like rejection. A neutral face can feel like a warning. That is how a private feeling begins to act like public evidence. This is also why the spotlight effect feels so personal. Inside your body, the moment is bright. Your chest tightens. Your skin gets hot. Your mind keeps revisiting the exact angle of your smile. Because it feels so loud in you, it seems obvious that it must have been loud to everyone else too. But most people are not watching your inner weather that closely. They are inside their own. They are wondering whether they talked too much, whether their joke landed, whether they seemed distracted, whether they should have left earlier. People notice less than the feeling predicts. The room was not empty of attention, but it was not aimed at you with the force your nervous system imagines. Still, uncertainty can feel like exposure. Not knowing what a cue meant leaves an open space, and the mind often fills open space with the harshest answer. A painful certainty can feel easier to manage than a blank. So one cue starts carrying the weight of the whole room. The cue may be real, the feeling may be real, but the conclusion can still be too large. A tight chest is not a witness. A private retelling is not a public story. The fact that your mind keeps returning to one detail does not mean that detail explains the entire scene. The softer truth is this: private tension is not the same thing as public attention. And once that becomes visible, the next question is easier to ask. Maybe the scene you keep editing was never complete in the first place. Sometimes the moment you keep fixing is not the one that happened in the room. It is the one you had to leave unfinished inside yourself. A meeting ends, and nothing dramatic seems to happen. Someone makes a sharp little comment, not cruel enough to challenge, but pointed enough to land. You laugh too quickly. You nod before you have chosen what you think. The conversation moves on, the screen changes, another topic opens. But later, your mind returns to that exact second, not because the whole meeting was ruined, but because your response never really arrived. The private retelling is often trying to put something back into the scene. Maybe the sentence you wish you had said. Maybe the expression you wish your face had allowed. Maybe just the pause you needed before smiling. You can see the same thing at a family dinner. Someone says, "You're always so sensitive," and everyone keeps passing plates. In the moment, you soften it. You make your voice lighter. You say, "No, it's fine," because the room is easier to protect than your own hurt. Then later, washing a glass at the sink or sitting in the car, the feeling comes back with more force than it had at the table. The mind starts editing, because the original version required you to disappear from it. Even small digital moments can do this. You send a voice note, then private retelling it once, then again listening for tone. Did you sound annoyed? Too needy? Too cold? The words are already gone, but your attention keeps circling the breath before one sentence, the tiny drop in your voice at the end, or a dashboard notification appears. One comment reopened, one reaction removed, one status changed. Suddenly, the whole exchange looks different. A conversation that felt ordinary 10 minutes ago now feels like evidence, and the memory reshapes itself around one new cue. The example matters, because it shows how memory private retelling is not always about the past. Often, it is about a response that got swallowed in the present. The mind returns to the scene like a careful editor, searching for the missing line, the honest face, the boundary that did not make it into the first draft. That does not mean every private retelling is accurate. It does not mean the other person saw what you fear they saw. But it also does not mean you are making the feeling up. The feeling may be real, because something in you had to move too fast. You performed okayness before you had time to know whether you were okay. So when the scene keeps changing in your head, it may not be asking you to punish yourself with another version. It may be asking, gently, what part of you got left out. The public story is still unfinished, not because disaster is waiting there, but because your inner response has not been heard yet. And the next useful moment is the second before fixing takes over. That is why the next section can turn the pattern into a usable move, instead of one more private rehearsal. The moment that matters usually arrives before the repair looks like repair. Your thumb is hovering over a message. The thread has already been read, but you open it again as if one sentence might change shape. You rehearse the comeback you should have made in the hallway. You check whether someone is online, not because you need information, but because their little green dot has started to feel like a public story. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. No apology has been sent. No explanation has been drafted. But inside, the body is already reaching for cleanup. That tiny reach is the usable second. Catch the moment before the feeling turns into a conclusion. Not to shame yourself for caring. Not to force yourself to be calm. Just to notice the exact handoff. A sting becomes a story becomes a task, and suddenly you are working on a scene that nobody else may still be holding. The move is simple enough to remember in the middle of it. Interrupt the reach, even briefly. Let the phone stay face up, without opening the thread again. Let the comeback remain unsent for one breath. Then name what is actually happening. I am trying to repair the feeling of being exposed. That sentence matters, because it keeps the problem in the body, where it began, instead of pretending the whole room has gathered again to judge you. Then widen the frame. The imagined audience is usually much larger than the visible evidence. What do you actually know? Someone paused, someone replied with fewer words than usual, someone laughed after your sentence, someone has not reacted yet. Those details may matter, but they are not the same as proof that you failed, annoyed everyone, or became the secret topic of the room. The spotlight effect makes one private reaction feel public. Widening does not erase the discomfort, it just stops discomfort from pretending to be evidence. And then come back to what can be seen, not what might be true if every fear connected perfectly, not what the memory says when it is revisiting at full volume. What is visible? What was said? What was not said? What response was delayed inside you? Maybe you wanted to say, "That bothered me." Maybe you wanted to ask for clarity. Maybe you wanted to stop smiling for 1 second and let your face be honest. Sometimes the repair urge is not really asking you to fix another person's opinion. It is asking you to find the response you swallowed. That is where the relief begins to feel more usable. The goal is not to stop caring. Caring is part of why the scene stayed bright in your mind. The goal is to stop letting care become endless cleanup. You can care about how you came across without reopening the whole case. Every time a message looks cold, you can learn from a moment without treating it like an emergency that needs another draft, another check, another invisible performance. From there, the final move is to shrink the story back to human scale. Maybe something small happened. Maybe something tender and you got touched. Maybe no one noticed as much as it felt. The past does not have to become an all-night assignment just because your body tried to protect you late. Maybe the kindest ending is not convincing yourself it never hurt. It is letting that bright room become a room again. A comment was made. You smiled. Someone laughed. The conversation moved on. Later, under a kitchen light or beside a dark phone screen, the same moment came back louder than it was. That return can feel like proof that something still needs to be fixed. But sometimes, it only means a feeling is asking to be felt without turning the whole night into an assignment. There is repair that belongs in the world. If you were unkind, if you missed something important, if a real apology would give another person care or clarity, then the repair can be simple and clean. A message, a sentence, a different choice next time. But there is another kind of fixing that only feeds the surge. It checks the memory again, not to learn, but to make the sting disappear. It tries to find the perfect version of a scene that already happened. It keeps asking for certainty from a moment that may never give it. The useful lens is this. Real repair brings you back into life. Surge repair keeps you locked in the scene. So when that old smile returns, try to see it with more tenderness. Maybe that smile was not fake. Maybe it was the best bridge you could build in a second, when you did not yet know what you felt. Maybe the delayed ache is not a public story against you, but a sign that part of you caught up later. You can learn from that. You can notice where you swallowed a response, where you wanted more time, where you might speak more honestly next time. But learning does not require living inside the private retelling. The past is allowed to stay smaller than the feeling it left behind. And maybe this is the relief. The mind does not have to solve every loose feeling before it is allowed to rest. You can let the moment matter without letting it become your whole night. You can let it teach you something, then let it become yesterday. The durable lens is simple. Private tension is not the same thing as public attention, and one steadier question can stop a feeling from becoming a harsh public story too quickly. Carry forward one calmer question. What actually happened, and what part of the story arrived from the feeling itself? That matters, because a smaller first interpretation gives the room a chance to stay human.